And so that's where on both businesses, we've gotten some of the insights around what makes us different or better, what we also could be doing better that maybe we would not have seen. And in like some of the ideas that we've gotten in terms of where we want to evolve to, or what we want to say, like going back to the marketing campaign idea, a lot of that came out of the comments we heard, people saying. But I will give you another example, which was one of the things we noticed on Noteworthy is a lot of people were commenting, I wish there was a smaller size that you would offer, because we just launched first with a 3.3 ounce or 100 ml bottle. And in response to that, within maybe 2 months, we launched travel sprays to try and, as a very MVP. So we sort of scrappily got a small number out there to see how it would resonate. And it's now a massive part of our business.
I'm Eric Fulweiler, and this is Scratch, bringing you marketing lessons from the leading brands and brains, rewriting the rulebook from scratch for the world of today.
Hey everyone, my guest today, Ashley Boyce, CMO of Perfume Group, which includes Proven Skincare and Noteworthy Scents. So Ashley is a seasoned CPG marketer. She's built a prolific career in marketing over the years. She spent a long time at Unilever, leading some of their top beauty and personal care brands, including Dove and Axe in Canada, where she's based. She's got so much knowledge of the incumbent side of the industry, obviously, having come up through the ranks at Unilever, and then doing what she's doing now over the last 2 years, launching a challenger in a sector, particularly in fragrances with the Noteworthy brand. And this was kind of my passion point in reaching out to her to begin with. I just feel like there's so much opportunity to disrupt this category. It's a $50 billion US market. And to me, it just seems like they're all doing exactly the same thing. And so no surprise, Ashley and the team at Noteworthy are doing some really exciting things with how they're building a challenger in that category. So we talk about her perspective on the differences between how incumbents and challengers go to market. We talk about why the perfume and fragrance category has gotten to a place where it's all kind of the same, and how they're thinking about doing things differently, and a bit of a David versus Goliath type story of how they're trying to punch above their weight and create an impact that's bigger than the dollars that they have. I really love her perspective, and she gets super tactical with things that everybody can do to be a little bit more customer centric in their approach to building their marketing, but also building their product. And then also, I think something that we all struggle with or try to overcome, regardless of the business that we're in, how do you change very entrenched behavior? A lot of people in perfume have always bought the same thing and plan on always buying the same thing. And so what they're trying to do and how they're approaching it of actually nudging and then driving behavior change, I think is really relevant to everybody listening. So I really enjoyed this episode. Really cool business, still early on. They are here in the UK, so hopefully people will test them out. Please enjoy my conversation with Ashley Boyce of Perfume Group and Noteworthy Fragrances. Hey, Ashley, thanks so much for joining me. How are things in Toronto?
Cold. They are very cold right now as we're recording in January. I think it's -7 degrees Celsius is the high today. So it's quite cold, but it's a Friday, so I can't complain.
It's gotten down to -5 here, and people are freaking out because that never happens. But those of us that have spent time in Canada, you in Toronto, and I went to McGill in Montreal back in the day, we know that Celsius and Fahrenheit overlap at -40 because it happens sometimes. So that is real cold.
There's apparently, in Canada right now, there's a deep, I think it's in a lot of places also in the US. I just got back from New York where we were trying to do an offsite and everyone's flights were canceled, with like 1 inch of snow. But all of the electric cars that people own out in the Midwest are not able to charge in these really, really cold temperatures. So they're just these electric cars are just sort of sitting there. So I was talking to someone this morning about it's a good lesson for the next evolution of these is how do we plan for this sort of extreme weather?
For sure. So Ashley, I appreciate you coming on. I obviously reached out to you, and I guess shouldn't be a surprise in our small world of marketing that we actually ended up knowing some people in common, particularly with your experience and network from your Unilever days. But I was particularly interested, coming across what you're doing with Noteworthy, because personally, and obviously we'll get into it, I just feel like fragrance and perfume as a category is ripe for disruption. And obviously you had the same perspective and idea. So before we get into everything, and I want to hear about kind of the Proven Group overall, as well as what you're doing with Noteworthy, the icebreaker question that we ask every guest is, what is one challenger brand that you're particularly passionate about right now and why?
I am really loving almost everything I see from the Care of brand, which is a personalized vitamin brand. I love how they serve up an experience that there's so many people that are trying to play in vitamins and supplements, whether it's, vitamins as an actual pill, whether it's supplements as smoothies or any additional things that you can add on top of your diet. It's a super, super crowded space with lots of big players and lots of really little ones that have come out. And one of the things I notice about that category is it can feel highly functional, which makes sense. These are meant to be performance products. But what I really like about what Care of does is they've managed to find a way to make a very functional, potentially unsexy category feel quite luxurious in their experience. And I think about that not only in their overall design, their UI, UX, but they've just launched a campaign that I get in my email all around sort of this concept of you being the US to you as part of what they're catering in personalization. And I just found that emotional chord that they're trying to strike really, really impactful as I think about how everyone else goes to market with clinical claims or really focusing on an ingredient story, which is not that they don't do those things, but because it's personalized, they do it in a way that feels, to me, much more premium.
Debating whether or not to jump way ahead here, but I really don't want to lose this question. I always think about how healthy ignorance is kind of an essential ingredient for innovation. If you only see the world one way, then you're just going to keep doing things the way you've always done. And sometimes if you come at things with a different perspective, a fresh perspective, a naive perspective, you're like, well, why wouldn't it be done this way instead? And oftentimes that doesn't work at all. And oftentimes it does. Is that, and I guess tying this to like you came from within the incumbent side of the industry, of course, in Unilever, how important do you think that is for the success of a brand like Care of or what you're doing with Noteworthy? And how do you supplement, maybe you do have kind of a healthy ignorance for the fragrance space. I don't know. And I mean that as a positive thing, not a negative thing. How do you supplement that if you are coming from an incumbent to now building a challenger?
I definitely had a healthy ignorance around the industry in general and thinking about it more as being a business owner rather than being a consumer. And what I think has made our approach impactful is the fact that we really came at it as trying to solve what the consumer problem is today that exists as a result of people doing the same thing over and over for years in this category, instead of really focusing on what is being underserved or underserviced here that we could do better, differently to really address a consumer pain point. And starting with what's the solution we want, and figuring out how do we engineer all the different parts to serve up the solution, rather than how do we first go with what are the operational complexities or what's going to happen competitively. We started instead with what's the real consumer pain point we're trying to solve and what's the best experience we can give people.
It really is amazing how much innovation really just comes down to that. And a healthy ignorance is one way to get there, but it's certainly not the only one. So I jumped us, way ahead in the queue here, but let's take a step back. For people who haven't come across what you're up to at Noteworthy and the Proving Group, can you give us an overview of the group? And then within that, what you're doing with Noteworthy and your role?
So what we are is basically a company that's dedicated to personalization within the beauty space. It's an underserved opportunity, and the reality is every individual is unique. And there's an opportunity for us as a company to be serving them better by offering more personalized experiences. So on the proven skincare side, it's all about how do we get people with various different skin concerns or issues matched with the right products with the right ingredients to help them combat what can be an extremely overwhelming category that it's very easy to get wrong and to waste money on, and in a really bad situation for you to have a facial or skin reaction that gets worse when you get the wrong product. And then on the Noteworthy side, it's all about helping people navigate a category that has historically been very hard to shop. And we do that in both businesses through using AI to help people get the right products for whatever their needs are. So on Noteworthy, it's about helping people get matched with a variety of different fragrances with a high likelihood that they are going to find at least a fragrance from what we send them that they're going to love. On Unproven, it's about getting someone a regimen that not only from the get-go combats their skin concerns, but that can also evolve with them as their skin improves or changes, as the season change, etc. So really, through both of those experiences, trying to service people in the most individualized way possible.
Amazing. And so I'm interested in both of those categories. I know the fragrance one is the one that we're going to focus on a little bit more right now. And I think the place to start is kind of like we touched on before with our kind of quick riff on healthy ignorance. But, this topic of incumbent versus challenger, and as I mentioned to you in our prep call, our business is focused on trying to understand what drives the growth of successful challenger brands. And so it's always interesting working with the likes of Unilever, who we do in Canada, but also talking to a business like yours that is very much the challenger trying to disrupt the industry. What are the biggest differences and what can both sides kind of learn from the other? So you, as someone who spent more than a decade at one of the biggest incumbents and now co-founded 2 years ago a challenger in the space, I guess let's just start there. Like, what are the biggest differences that you see that you've experienced so far between how an incumbent in this category goes to market and how challengers should, or how you're doing it with Proven and Noteworthy?
I love this question. And I love that I have had the amazing opportunity to work with two businesses that I'm extremely proud of. So I loved working first at Unilever. I spent 14 years there working across their, beauty and personal care division. And I felt like I got to learn from the best of the best when it came to marketing. I got to work on many wonderful, iconic brands that have been built over decades, whether it was, Dove or Vaseline, or on our men's category on Axe. And what I think incumbent businesses do really well, that challenger businesses have to do to be competitive, is they're wonderful at building brand stories and sort of brand love. And the benefit of being an incumbent is you've had, decades to do that. The other thing incumbents do really well is scale. Their ability to scale and to get, whether it's scaling marketing efforts, to be unique in different places from an activation perspective, or scaling from a distribution point of view, or from a manufacturing point of view. There's tons of benefits to being able to sort of scale a business and reap the benefits there. What has then made on the challenger side my experience so interesting is figuring out, how do you take the things you have to do to be a winning challenger, which includes creating meaningful brand connections with your consumers, and figure out what are the incumbents either not able or potentially unwilling to do to address consumer pain points in the category. And I think one of the biggest differences that I've seen in my experience, actually the two biggest things that I see is when you're in a challenger business, your ability to test and learn and take risks and really think about what does MVP mean to either prove an insight, prove a hypothesis, is so much easier to do when you're smaller and you have speed. And frankly, the risk profile changes. And so for me, like being able to test something within a day that, you're not going through layers of different people, or you're not worried about what is, my main retailer going to say when they see that I'm testing this thing. That has been one of the, I think, most freeing things about being an incumbent or a challenger is you're usually more willing to take risks to address what is going to be best for your consumers. And then I think the other thing that has been really impactful for me is when you're smaller, you typically have much more direct relationships with your consumers, the people ultimately that you're trying to serve a better or a different solution, and how you can foster that connection, use it to fuel your marketing, your business, your product innovation, I have found to be just really meaningful and enlightening. And it means that I get insights that I just would never have had when I'm not having those sort of one-to-one direct relationships with consumers, which is typically how incumbents operate.
So we've had a bunch of people on the show who come from, big incumbent consumer packaged goods businesses, Unilevers, L'Oreal's, P&G's, et cetera. And one of the things that we've talked about, and I've certainly noticed both in interviewing them and also in working with some of these organizations, is they're fantastic about giving people a strong foundation and fundamental skills in marketing. So I'd be curious, while there's, of course, it probably feels like many handcuffs and weights that have come off and moving from a Unilever to be able to do, your own thing in the way that you want to do it and take advantage of all those things that you have as a challenger that you didn't have as an incumbent. But are there any kind of core principles or frameworks or, what are the biggest things from that great experience that you had at Unilever that you're taking and still using in your kind of challenger marketing playbook as well?
Tons. And I would also say, interestingly enough, as we've been building our teams, we look at both challenger businesses and incumbents, because we know that with challenger businesses, you're going to bring in talent that knows how to move quickly, that probably isn't afraid of risk, that really has that sort of scrappy, resourceful mindset that you have to have at a smaller startup brand. But an incumbent marketer or business person will have had such rigorous training. They will have been exposed to a variety of different business experiences that they can then bring and sort of help elevate the work that, you do in a startup. The thing that I probably bring the most from my time at Unilever is focus on building a brand that's differentiating and meaningful and creates emotional resonance with the consumer. Because the reality is, in CPG, products are a dime a dozen. There are lots of different startups at, if I think about fragrance, there are different startups at a mass market level. There are lots of different opportunities and players at a prestige, and there's even more that you see also in, the luxury scale. So there's no shortage of people that are here. But the reality is, you can't just make a great product because of that. You have to create something else that people feel connected to be able to compete in a meaningful way in a market that's very saturated. And I would say the other thing that a big players like Unilever, P&G, L'Oreal do very well is marketing discipline. It can be very easy to chase a million different exciting ideas. And one of the things that a lot of these big players do well is really focus on the things that are going to move the needle. And so what we balance every day at an incumbent brand is, especially when we're short on time, short on resources, how do we focus on what are going to be the biggest things that we need to chase, while also not losing our ability to move fast when we see an opportunity come up, because they often are presenting themselves through, feedback we're getting, where a vendor will come and say, a big part of our advantage is speed. So it's how do we balance, the right priorities so that we're not wasting resources with things that are ultimately going to drive either differentiation, meaningful business impact, or a real point of difference with every other brand that might be in the market.
Hey everyone, just wanted to take a quick break because we've actually heard from many of you that you want to get a better understanding of what it is that we actually do as a business. You know us through this podcast, all the content that we put out, the events that we put on, the community that we have, the media company side of what we're up to here at Rival. But actually the core business, just to kind of fill you all in, is we're a full service marketing agency at this point. Obviously, we specialize in challenger brands. And what that means is that we work with either startups to help them scale and get to the next level, or we work with a lot of incumbents like Reebok, Unilever, JP Morgan to help them innovate or launch something new within the marketing function. We typically work across four main areas of the marketing department: brand and product positioning, creative ideation and production, paid media planning and buying, and customer data and marketing technology. We're also building some tech of our own, as you would have seen with Curo and also Enodo. So that's it. Just wanted to fill you all in since you've asked for it. And if you're interested in hearing more about what we're up to, please get in touch. But with that, I'll let you get back to the show. Can you share an example of, whether it's at Unilever, or potentially you could contrast that with how you've tried to go about it with Noteworthy or Proven, of, totally agree, the more kind of commoditized the product is in a category, the more important it is to kind of have a brand that really resonates with people, that tells a story, as you said. What's a great example of that for you? And how do you think, because I think, certainly in CPG, everybody's trying to accomplish that, right? Certainly there are some organizations that are more brand-led than others, and that trickles down. But for the most part, they all get that. They're trying to do it, but so few of them actually succeed. So what's an example of one that's like really high up there for you, and what do you think they've done well to get there?
Do you mean like a brand that creates really strong emotional resonance?
Yeah, exactly.
It would be easy to just say to lean into Dove, because a lot of what Dove does is so meaningful. But I would say that that's not, that Dove didn't start as that necessarily. Dove started more as a product. And I think a lot of sort of brands and businesses start like that. They start as a product that's really fulfilling a consumer need. So one of the things, Dove Bar was really born out of the need to have a cleansing solution that was milder than soap. That is so different than if you look at the campaign they launched in the first half of this year with Nike as being a brand that really stands for female empowerment, real people, challenging stereotypes. And I think that when you can sell a really great product and then find a way to tie the product that you sell with something that will be meaningful to people, that's when it becomes ownable. At Noteworthy right now, a lot of what we've been talking about is, a business that's, coming up on 2 years. What's going to be our emotional point of difference? Because it's not enough to just sell fragrance. And it also isn't enough to just solve a consumer need, which is, the way we do it through personalization. If we're going to create something that people want to talk about, something that people are, for me, a big thing is you want to have the bottle out on your vanity, or you want to have it in the bathroom, or you take, the rollerball out of your purse and people are like, oh, you have that. Like, if you're going to do those things, which is, the social cachet and connection that everyone wants, you do have to create some emotional resonance. And so a lot of the work that we will be rolling out in our marketing over the next few months are really going to be focused on how do we create more emotional resonance and meaning with our consumers, which is really leaning into this idea that the best work we can do as a fragrance company is get somebody a perfume that is so them, the thing that makes them feel confident, elevated, sexy, whatever it is that they're hoping that a perfume will do for them. How do we sort of make everyone feel, like this is their so me scent?
And the campaign that you mentioned you're rolling out, how did you get there? Like, how did you kind of define that story for Noteworthy? Did you hire an agency? It was just a very clear vision that you and your co-founder had from the beginning. What was the process to land on that story to then go create the emotional connection with consumers in the market?
So we worked with a couple of different people. So at first, it started actually by playing back what were people saying they liked about us, right? What was the thing that people connected with? And yes, it was like, we love, the personalized discovery kit process. We like the quiz. It's really fun to get perfumes that we like. But the number one thing I kept seeing as I would get emails or I'm, reading comments that I see in our Facebook ads is people being like, this, XX perfume this is my signature. Everyone knows me when I'm wearing it. This one feels so me. I was so surprised by the fact that, this was a perfume that I liked, and yet it's just the epitome of what I want to smell like. And we started to sort of contrast that with, well, what exists on the market today? A lot of, perfume brands, and this isn't a criticism. I think there's space for a lot of different brands in today's market, but it was a lot of, do you want to own a piece of X designer, or do you want to aspire to be like Y celebrity? And none of those things were about you. They were all about, whatever that designer's vision was or whatever that celebrity's vision was. And there aren't really a whole lot of perfumes that are talking about not even personalization as a concept, but the idea that it's really not so much about the fragrance as it is what your fragrance experience is, how a perfume smells on you. And it is, for the fact that this category is so personal, the fact that there aren't a whole lot of people sort of leaning into that, to me, just felt like such a miss. So when we realized that there was sort of a blank space there, that it was what people were saying about us, it became really clear that there was an opportunity for us to lean more into that as our storytelling. So, we started with that, and then this is what we wanted to stand for. This is how we wanted to be differentiated. And then we worked with a few different partners. One, is our internal copywriter. Another was an external consultant that we worked with to really refine. So how are we going to take this concept and find a way to actually distill it down and explain it to consumers? And so a lot of that work and that language and that sort of thought process is some of what we started rolling out now, even through it's already started in our emails. We're going to bring it more into our site. And then to me, there's obviously, when we think about the marketing campaigns we want to run in the paid space, how do we bring that in a way that is, meaningful, differentiated, and then resonates with people?
So there's kind of the story that you tell. So we kind of touched on that for Noteworthy, how it's different from the industry and how it's, a fresh perspective on how to build a brand, but still have an emotional connection in the space. But then there's, of course, where and how you tell it. So when you are up against, these billion-dollar brands that just have this money-making machine of hire X celebrity, hire Y director, do those what I think are really obnoxious and all look exactly the same, extreme over-the-top kind of TV commercials, or you see them in airports or whatever. When you're up against that, assuming that y'all don't have those budgets, what are you actually doing differently from a distribution, comms planning, channel mix perspective to compete?
So there's a couple things that I think we do differently. So one is we really focus, because our entire distribution right now is through D2C. We're really focused on digital channels. And I think many brands are, but, I think one of the things that we've really leaned into, besides, paid Meta and, paid TikTok advertising, is how can we use influencers and content creators as part of, instead of just viewing them as, traditional sort of CPA-based acquisition channels, how can we look at that group of people more as content that fuels our additional channels, as well as sort of looking at them as a distribution channel themselves, or at least a marketing channel themselves. And so a lot of what I have found is when I think about traditional influencer marketing or what I had seen from influencer marketing, a lot of it has historically been creators with a big following that you try to get to do a post in their feed or a reel or whatever it is. And a lot of that was traditionally focused on Meta. What we've actually started to use influencers and creators in our marketing mix to do is use them to talk to their own audience when it resonates, but really figure out how we can use these individual people and amplify them through their own channels or through our channels to create new and differentiated ways to show up. I think TikTok has been very, very interesting as a platform where, if I think about Instagram, if you're going to do a story, that's gone in 24 hours, right? You have that amount of time and that's it to land that with someone. And the reality is many people, especially on, Instagram, are focused on stories these days. But on TikTok, a lot of that content is evergreen. So what I think has been really cool is been working with different creators is not just using their, their first sort of post and posting date to amplify it, but to actually go back and say, if this content's going to be evergreen, how else can I use that beyond just an initial post to reach people in a meaningful way? Because a lot of our creators create super intriguing, meaningful, often not time-bound content that we can distribute either through amplifying in Spark or whitelisting, through, putting in our own handles, but also then thinking through, okay, well, where else can I put that content to have it feel resonant with someone? So whether it's thinking about, where could that fit within a YouTube or a Google environment? Where could that live even within our site? Where else might we want to take that content and atomize it out to reach people? That to me has been something that I don't typically see, because a lot of what you end up seeing from a lot of bigger brands is they'll do time-bound campaigns that are linked to a perfume launch or a season or a moment in time, whereas we're really looking at this as we're always on evergreen acquisition. And so how do we continue to create meaningful content that we can push out in different ways that is just about our core main message and our sort of growth driving agenda? It's not time-bound to, the Super Bowl or whatever else it is, which allows us a lot of flexibility and a lot of efficiency. And it also means we're not, in the same way that many big companies are, bound to try and get turns on a product within a very short amount of time to make sure that as we're satisfying our retail partners and their requirements. We can do things a little bit more scrappily, and we can be a little bit more thoughtful around what is our testing strategy, what's our creative optimization strategy, where are we learning, and then sort of scaling when we find things that work.
Within that, I think one of the nuances of your category as I see it, but of course you're the expert, so let me know, is it's one of those categories where there's a lot of entrenched behavior, or even loyalty, but I think sometimes it's just like, well, I've done this the same way for so long, so the barrier to change is much higher. Banking, I think, is something similar. I think there's a stat where it's like people are more likely to get divorced than they are to change their bank. But certainly fragrance, I think of my wife, and like she's always bought the same Chanel perfume because that's what she's always bought, and that's what her mom bought, actually. So there's maybe a correlation there to banking as well. So how do you think about, how is that factor, obviously with what you're doing with the personalization aspect of it, that's kind of like an easier entry point for people, right? Like you send them something, they get to kind of develop their own thing. So, that's obviously intentional, but how much, or how do you think about kind of entrenched behavior and changing that if you're trying to disrupt the category like you are with fragrance?
Yeah, and I think, again, in any business, there's some things we do well and some things where we have some opportunity on. So I think how we first started to come to market was to think about what's the consumer pain point people are currently experiencing when they're trying to find a new fragrance. And there are a lot of reasons someone might try to find a new fragrance, and there are a lot of reasons someone might not be willing to. So on the trying new fragrance pieces, there's everything from, I am just someone who loves perfume, and I am someone who loves perfume, so I'm always looking for the next thing. There is the, I have a special occasion coming up, and so I'm trying to shop for something that, is linked to that. Weddings are one that comes to mind, or, I'm searching for something special to bring on vacation. Or there are many people for whom, and this is a common thing I hear, they wear a fragrance for years and their fragrance gets discontinued. And they go, you're a fragrance person, I am looking for something else. And so we really started saying, okay, for those people that are actively engaged, and there's, again, people who are maybe loyal on the fragrance side, people who are maybe not, how do we create a solution that takes away the pain point of trying to go in a store where you can only smell so many fragrances before you become nose blind or experience something called olfactive fatigue? How do we de-risk buying something online where you have no idea what something might smell like? And so asking you to spend, $100 on a fragrance that could give you a migraine, could be something that you hate, could be something your partner or your friends hate. That's a really high risk. And create solutions that could sort of service that. Interestingly enough, there are lots of people, and this will be sort of the next group we go after, people who have been using their fragrance for a long time who maybe weren't as open to trying something new, to give them a real reason for why they can find a fragrance that they love. And so in our quiz, for example, we actually ask people a lot of questions about their fragrance behavior. So we ask people, how loyal are you? How many do you wear? How long have you sort of been wearing them? So we can start to figure out within those groups of people that maybe are loyal, that are not, have been using the same thing for however number of years, and it's just one thing. How do we create products or experiences that resonate with that group of people while we're also creating experiences that resonate for people who are just actively searching for a new fragrance and already sort of had that openness? Because eventually, in any business, that consumer pool is only a certain size. So how do we figure out on the more loyal side what's something that people might be excited about, which can be the fragrance itself, it can be just the experience that we offer someone, it can be the opportunity to try something at a low risk, and sort of determining what's going to be that thing that's going to get that behavior change that you mentioned, because behavior change in any category is probably one of the hardest things for a challenger brand to come in and try and shake up.
Yeah, it is a lot of test and learn, and that's certainly kind of a consistent theme in the conversations that we have with a lot of challenger CMOs and founders, is that approach of like, I know I need to change this, but I'm going to, place a lot of bets, put a lot of feelers out there to let the customer help guide me on the most effective way to do that. And on that, I think the next, and probably like the last big area that I really wanted to make sure that we touched on in our conversation, you said it explicitly in the beginning, and then it's kind of been a red thread throughout everything else that you've said, has been the importance of customer centricity. One of the things you said in our prep call that I really loved is you talked about now at Noteworthy, you read every email from every customer, whereas when you were at Unilever, and this is of course the case with any big company, there's layers and layers, of regulation and protocol and technology and all that stuff between you and the customer in many ways. So I'd love for you to just share, because I'm sure there's a lot that people listening can learn, like what are you doing to make sure that you are focused on the customer, understanding their needs, and then applying that to how you're growing your business?
Totally. And we actually do this on both Noteworthy and Proven. So I'll first start with some of the more quantitative things that we do, which is anyone who gets either a Proven skincare subscription or gets a discovery kit from us, we send them emails asking them to rate their experience. So their experience be positive or be negative. Anyone who has any sort of response to us, we reach out to. We try to engage with them. On the positive side, if you've found a fragrance that you love, great. I'm going to try and let you know here are the options to actually make it easy to go and buy from your discovery kit a full-size one. On the Proven side, if someone's, for example, having some sort of, maybe they didn't love one of the formulations they got, how do we then go out and reach out to those people and say, hey, did you know that we'll reformulate? We have a personalized way that we work with you. How can we make sure that we give you the best experience possible? So we're actively going out to solicit feedback from people to make sure their experience is better. And this isn't about ratings and reviews. Like, I'm not asking someone in that experience to go and write a review on my website. This is literally making sure that we understand the percentage of people that are having good and bad experiences, and we triage them, which in theory is a bit like obviously an NPS score. But this is what we try to do with that, is not just sit back on our laurels and say, okay, 80% of people are having a great experience. It's, okay, these people are having a great experience. Why? These people are having a less great experience. What can we do to make the experience better? On the more qualitative side, I read, like I was saying, I read now almost every email because our customer base has grown a little bit that we get from people both on the positive and the negative side. But I also read almost every single social comment. So like my phone, I have alerts whenever we get, comments on our Facebook page, which allows me to understand, like the ratings do a great job helping me understand what are people sort of numerically saying about their experience. But on the comment side, someone who's publicly commenting about their experience with us is literally hoping other people will see it and they're sharing on our behalf. And so that's where on both businesses, we've gotten some of the insights around what makes us different or better, what we also could be doing better that maybe we would not have seen. And in like some of the ideas that we've gotten in terms of where we want to evolve to, or what we want to say, like going back to the marketing campaign idea, a lot of that came out of the comments we heard, people saying. But I will give you another example, which was one of the things we noticed on Noteworthy is a lot of people were commenting, oh, I wish there was a smaller size that you would offer, because we just launched first with a 3.3 ounce or 100 ml bottle. And in response to that, within maybe 2 months, we launched travel sprays to try and, as a very MVP, so we sort of scrappily got a small number out there to see how it would resonate. And it's now a massive part of our business. And the other thing we see from people that we, are trying to figure out how do we optimize and give good experiences on is when we launch those travel sprays, tons of people are buying multiples and different fragrances. So out of that, we created a build your own bundle experience so people could optimize and do this very easily where it wasn't easy to do before. So a lot of what we're trying to do is listen in a way that's really open-minded, because I think the other thing is, a lot of the research that I have seen in my experience, there's sort of an end goal in mind of what you're trying to get out of a focus group. I'm trying to test X product concept. I'm trying to see, what the risk here is. And it's less about just how do we get open-ended feedback that can make our business better or more meaningful for people. And so that's a lot of the approach that we take.
Working for Gary Vaynerchuk for so many years, that was something that I saw him do religiously, and obviously at tremendous scale now, but still does it, is reading, not all the comments at this point, but a lot of the comments of what people are saying. It's just an always on, unbiased focus group of your customers or your audience. And of course, there's a lot of noise in there as well, but there are so many signals. So I think that's like a super specific thing that people listening can do, really regardless of the size of your business. But especially if you're a startup or a challenger, just making sure that you're listening to what people are saying and capturing all of that. And then, of course, building on top of it. All right, Ashley, this has been fascinating. Lots of takeaways for me. Obviously, we're B2B services and not consumer packaged goods and fragrance, but still so many things that I'm personally taking away and I'm going to think about a lot more. Before I let you go, I'd love to do a quick lightning round. So 1 to 2 sentence answers on a few questions here. So can you tell us about the first marketing job you ever had?
I was an intern at an advertising agency working on Unilever before I started at Unilever.
Nice. What's the best piece of career advice you've ever received?
Your weaknesses are someone else's strengths. So be careful how much time you spend on them.
What's the best brand campaign you've seen recently?
I got to say the Dove and Nike one.
I'll have to check that out. Actually, I haven't seen it, so I'll do that. What is one marketing tool that you can't live without?
Meta.
What's the one thing people should do differently after listening to this episode?
Buy Perfume online.
Do you ship to the UK?
We sure do.
All right. I have to check it out. You know what? I'm going to squeeze one more in here. Varen and I were talking about this last night. We used to do it in the beginning, but I think we should bring it back. Who would you recommend we have on the show next?
I spent 6 months working between when I left Unilever and when I joined, or when we really decided to do Noteworthy and Proven full time, working at a tech startup called Pocket Health, which was really cool. They what they do is they give people in Canada access to their medical imaging, which is something that can be very difficult to do. And I worked for probably one of the brightest, kindest marketing leaders I've ever worked in, whose name is Nick Stein. He's a Canadian as well. And he had it was my first time working in any sort of SaaS company or B2B because I'd spent so many years working in B2C. And his insight, the way he approaches marketing is just, he's someone for whom there is no downside to talk to.
Love it. I will check them out and I might follow up with you for an introduction because it sounds fascinating. And actually, another thing we were talking about came up at dinner last night. Someone said health tech is the new fintech. So it made me think that maybe we should look a little bit more at that category and get some folks on to talk about what's happening in it.
He's now the CMO at a company called Maple in Canada, which is all virtual care. So really, really cool experience. And they do a ton of stuff now. So I think that that's certainly opening up. I have a couple other people I can connect you in healthcare tech if you'd like to.
Amazing. Appreciate it. All right, Ashley, thank you so much for your time. Fascinating conversation. I really appreciate it. And I know our listeners do too.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure. It's a wonderful way to spend an hour or so.
Have a great day. We'll talk soon.
Sounds good.
Scratch is a production of Rival. We are a marketing innovation consultancy that helps businesses develop strategies and capabilities to grow faster. If you want to learn more about us, check out wearerival.com. If you want to connect with me, email me at eric@wearerival.com or find me on LinkedIn. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe, share with anyone you think might enjoy it, and please do leave us a review. Thanks for listening and see you next week.